of light caught my eye, and I saw that it was in the top arch of his foot. Then I realised not only that here I was at Jesus' feet and he's real, but the crucifixion was real. I just didn't expect that.
This is Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide. And we see God. We see his hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, visions. Today, near-death experiences. I am your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome. What we have here is episode 111. Then we have Pauline and her near-death experiences. How old was she when she had this big experience? Try 11, so you got another 1. I don't know what all these ones mean, but I'm sure it's good. There's just something about near-death experiences that it's magnetic. It's just, how do you, I hear people try to explain these things. Well, it's because the brain has a hydraulic sutunator valve and it breaks and then the brain, come on. How about just sometimes the obvious answer is the easiest one? God. Maybe God had something to do with some of these things. I was looking at some recent stories I've come across. The woman who was having the near-death experiences, and she was coming up out of the from her body and out of the building and heading up, but she was, as she's outside the building she was in, she saw a worn shoe on a window ledge on some floor. And so when she came back, she said, I saw there's a shoe. Sure enough, they went and you couldn't see it from the inside. You had to, I don't know if they crawled out a window, what they did, but the only place you could see it was either crawling out on the ledge or from where she was outside the building. Crazy story. I love the stories about those who are blind from birth. 80% of those who are blind from birth, who have near-death experiences, can see in the midst of their near-death experience. 80%. Sometimes it shocks them. Sometimes it seems very natural. They can do colors. Not that, that's green, that's blue, but the man was wearing a shirt the same color as the blanket on the bed, that kind of thing, and it all matches up. Just, how do you explain that? Well, the hydraulic sutunator valve was broken. How about God? Once again, how about God? In this episode, Pauline Glamochak, she's from Australia, not originally, born in Croatia, what was then Yugoslavia. Back when she was 3, the family left the country. We'll get to that.
Yeah, so I didn't speak English when I first started school. And
you sure speak it now, beautifully. We love Australia.
Yeah, we consider ourselves the 51st state, I think.
I'm in. Australia, 51st state. In fact, Australia, you guys are so big, you should be 10 states. You'll be states 51 through 60, okay? That flag's going to get busy. It's going to get all those stars. Oh, man, it's going to be great. So we'll get to a lot of things. She had an encounter when she was 6 or 7 with God, saved her life. And Pauline, no great believer in Jesus. In fact, that there was no connection at all. And what makes this look at the title. What makes this episode a little different here, I think, from most. At age 11, yes, she died and met Jesus and Mary. But what's so unique about this aspect of the story is that she meets the resurrected Jesus, yes, but she meets the earthly Mary. It is fascinating. So let's start with Pauline here from
Croatia, but it was Yugoslavia at that time, so it was a communist country. Mm-hmm. It was a very difficult time for my parents. My father was actually imprisoned in Italy when he tried to escape over the border.
Atheists? What was going on there at the time?
Yeah, they were completely atheists. You could go to church, but then you would never qualify. You would always have, the lowest rung of positions. You basically were an outcast. It was toe the party line or get on the bread line.
Yeah. So, how did your family get from there to Australia?
Well, Australia at the time had a shortage of labour. So my parents chose Australia because of the Dad actually hated the winter. So that was how we ended up in Australia. Mum converted to Catholicism because my father's half-brother is a Franciscan priest, and they found the Croatian church so they could worship in their own language. And so it was a very big connection connection again for them, the Catholic Church. So we went to Sunday school, but Mum always prayed to us every night about angels taking care of us.
Yeah.
I wasn't that keen on church, or I just didn't feel connected to the kind of religion that I experienced. It was very masculine kind of religion.
So for you, there just wasn't a connection. Not unusual. There are a lot of us who went through the schooling and all that, but it just didn't connect until later for us. So I get that. My experience in doing this podcast and talking to people who have experiences is that, especially when, in your case, you got really kind of a series. You had this series of experiences when you were very young. And my experience with listeners who have shared their story is that often has something to do with God helping through what's going to be a pretty bumpy ride at some point in our lives, so that we can look back on those moments and kind of grab them and say, oh, okay, God is with me here, and this will help me get through. Was that your experience? Do you think, as you kind of add 2 + 2 together here?
Absolutely, but it took me a long time to get those sums right. It took me a long time before that dawned on me that was what was happening. And yeah, so.
You mentioned that when you were 6 years old, something happened. What was that?
So yeah, the teachers took us to the beach and we had a bit of a drill. They told us all about, how to behave in the water and if anyone gets into trouble, what to do. And then basically it was a very joyful kind of experience, and suddenly the weather turned. My friend and I, Clarissa, we were in the water sort of, I don't know, about, up to the midriff, and just got taken by a rip. I'd never even, to me, I was just like taken away under the water. It was a bizarre experience and tossed and turned under the waves. I couldn't see anything. Everything was murky. And then I found myself thudding to the bottom of the floor. I hadn't taken a proper breath because it was such a surprise to be taken like that, and I wasn't a swimmer at all. And yeah, I just remember having my last breath, and then this voice, I didn't see anyone, but I suddenly felt held, and a voice just permeated into me, and I just felt, safe and very safe. And he just basically told me to breathe in, and it was a very authoritative but kind voice, and he told me to open my eyes. And I thought to myself, again, he could read my mind, and I thought to myself, I can't open my eyes because my eyes sting. I can't open my eyes. And again, he said, open your eyes. And I opened my eyes and I saw so very clearly under the water and had no stinging, and the water was all clear and calm again. Then he just I felt just like I was just buoyed up. And as soon as I came to the surface, I caught a breath and just felt very, very calm. Whether I died briefly or I don't know. I was then, just very, very calm because I'd encountered whether it was my angel or I just was protected. I was saved.
Yeah, you were saved. You say male voice, as you say, angel, God. Are you thinking more angel? At what point does this start clicking in your mind? Because initially it's just, what was that, I'm sure?
I still feel, I still feel hesitant to say that I thought immediately that it was God, because it was so authoritative and just so, yeah, I just thought it was God. That was all that I could think of as a child. I just thought I'd had an encounter with God. And although I felt really calm when I came up and just bobbed and waved, I was, under no distress. But when I did come, when brought me to shore, I was vomiting up water and, it was not well at all. But yet for that time until I got to shore, I was just completely peaceful.
Yeah. Wow. On one hand, you're feeling secure, you're feeling calm, you feel that somehow you're with God, somebody is kind of there with you. On the other hand, your body actually has sucked in a bunch of water, and all those physical things have occurred. You're just not even aware of it.
Yes, precisely. It was just a real dichotomy between how I felt inside and, how our body can sometimes, if our body's not comfortable, then we go into high anxiety. But in this case, even though my body was full of water, my spirit was at the fore.
This is not unusual. Back at episode, I want to say 25 or so, a gentleman named Jeff had a similar experience as an adult where riptide and got carried out 75, 100 yards, whatever it was. And he also was going down. He was done. He was done. He was done trying to swim against it. He was just done. And in his case, again, I don't remember there being a voice. In his case, he felt this giant hand on his back. And suddenly he was being pushed towards shore at a very high rate of speed. And in fact, his daughter could see him coming. It's like a torpedo underwater, making some kind of, little tidal wave there. And he got shoved onto the beach where he started, retching and throwing it all up and everything. But again, it wasn't his time yet. It wasn't your time yet, obviously. I mean, you should have drowned, right? You should have drowned.
Yes, I should have drowned. I should have drowned. It's amazing. But everybody was so panicked. All of the teachers were so panicked. I was mortified, embarrassed because, being a child who couldn't quite speak English yet, sort of being picked on for that, what school's like. But sort of, enduring some kind of, some backlash for that. I just really wanted to be very innocuous and just, and so having drawn so much attention to myself I was mortified. I was absolutely mortified. And I could see the teachers were so distressed and I just felt like, oh no, I've been, I've been such a troublemaker. And so, and when I came home, my parents' reaction was they were so distressed. And I was just really caught up in everybody else's emotions about it and, didn't really have the wherewithal to just sort of say, this fantastic, this happened.
So you didn't tell them what happened?
No. I only told my friend Clarissa, who was the other person who was taken out, but she wasn't taken out as far, 47 years ago. Trapper, 47 years ago is quite a time. So I was 6 or 7 years, probably 7 actually.
So here you have this really powerful experience at age 7, which maybe in its own way prepares you for what happened when you were 11.
I don't know whether it did, Trapper, because I really did put it away. Didn't speak of it. I was quite a modest child.
So you already had that humility thing going in your own. You're this nice girl, doesn't want to bother anybody. And I think the thing about being a child is we understand where everything comes from. We understand that our parents provide everything. We understand that's why we have the house and the food and how I get from point A to point B in my parents' cars. We seem to have a better understanding of that everything is provided by our parents. Whereas when we get out here and become an adult, it's like we forget the fact that everything still comes from the Father. We want to give ourselves credit for things that we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be crediting ourselves. Everything still comes from our Heavenly Father, and I think we kind of lose that childlike nature in us.
Yeah, very much so. I think that's a really insightful thing that you said, because I was so aware of being dependent on my parents that I really couldn't wait to be independent or, try to be independent. And in my keenness to become an independent woman, I did sort of turn away from you know, I didn't really integrate my spiritual experiences at all. Everything was about material success and, you know, being a strong woman, a strong, independent woman that didn't have to rely on anybody, you know. So my sort of teen years and early 20s to well, probably till mid-30s were like that. So
I think that's why we get most of us get to live as long as we do, is that we get to go through that. And then somewhere along the way, the light bulb is supposed to go on where we go, oh, and then we kind of work our way back to them. I think it's just part of the general premise that we all in some way, shape, or fashion go through to find our way back to them. At least that's, it seems like we're given these hurdles, if you will, for a purpose. You know, it's all part of coming back to them.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Okay, so what was next for you?
Of course, the big one when I was 11. So we went on a family picnic. We'd gone to visit friends in Victoria. We're in South Australia. And so we'd gone interstate to visit friends, one of those Griswold family holidays. And we went to this beautiful area called Mount Macedon in the Mount Macedon Ranges, where, I don't know if you've heard that film Picnic at Hanging Rock.
Sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't know enough. Tell me more. What is about this place?
Yeah. Turns out it's a spiritually significant area. When we came there, we went to visit, there was this huge crucifix on a hill, a memorial, an Anzac, a war memorial. So we went to visit that and climbed up these steps and stood there and saw this beautiful view. And, you know, then we went to the actual picnic grounds and set up. I didn't think much. We could just, you know, us children, all we wanted to do was sort of, you know, separate from the parents and go and play. Parents had set up the picnic ground and we sort of took off running down the hill. It was a couple of older boys and my brother and sister and I. And we were basically racing down this hill and tripped on a rock. And instead of going with the impetus and falling forward, because I was afraid of falling on my face, so I flung myself back and hit my head. Well, expected to feel that I hit my head, but I didn't feel any kind of impact. So I thought, you know, what's going on? And I opened my eyes and I was basically out of my body, looking down at my body and being drawn through the air. It's like when you're out of your body, it's as though everything is peeled away, Trapper. Like all of the things that we put over ourselves for protection, you know, anxiety, defense mechanisms, our will, none of that was there, you know, no desire. It was just being pure essence of yourself. Like there's this freedom that's, it's just like all of the layers are taken off and
every ounce of fear obviously is gone.
Yes, every ounce of fear. Because
I always find it interesting that anytime someone has an experience with, say, an angel or Jesus appears to somebody or Mary, anytime in the Bible, it happens over and over again, is that what's the first thing out of the heavenly being's mouth is, don't be afraid, because that's our nature. Our nature is to be afraid.
Exactly. But when we leave our bodies, we leave that aspect of our nature behind. So here I am floating above and I can see my body, but I'm just more enamored with what I'm seeing below me and the movement and the way that I'm feeling. So I've got this beautiful view of the Macedon Ranges. It's just spectacular, and I'm just taking everything in. Every moment is really long and rich and full experientially because those layers aren't there between yourself and the experience. So next thing I know, I'm in this cold. I just suddenly feel extremely cold and I'm in a whiteout and I'd gone through the clouds and suddenly I was above the clouds. And with feeling cold, then I felt fear. Wondered, well, how far am I going to go? And I looked up and everything was dark blue. There was no sky above me anymore. And this black tunnel, hole, portal appeared above me and vacuumed me very, whereas before I was traveling quite lightly, now it vacuumed me very forcefully. And for a little while I was in the blackness, and when I felt a kind of fear about the blackness and where am I going, I looked up and saw light and just, was extremely relieved to see the light, and came closer and closer to the light. And finally I was in the warmth of the light, and it was a golden kind of light. The light has got this quality that's not just visual, it's almost like honey, or it's so difficult to describe because it's not just a visual gold. It's got this emotional quality to it that's beyond love. It's
Well, we use love for I love pizza, and I love my dog, and I love my wife, I love my husband, I love my, whatever. It's too bad we don't have a little richer language when it comes to love, because as I hear you try to describe it, you're not only seeing it, you're feeling it. You even mentioned something that we can immediately taste. It's like it's hitting all your senses.
It does. It's like velvet honey, light. If that was amalgamated, that's and love, huge love, beautiful, all-encompassing, warm love. And I remember sort of flying over, or sort of coming down and landing. It was like I was on a plane, Trapper, like a flat plane. I can't remember all the the buildings and all of that, but this family was there, and they were my family, and they were all cheering, like they were cheering as they saw me. But that sort of really fades into, and it was, I had this immediate feeling that, okay, I've done this before. I've been here before.
Oh. It's like you had some kind of welcoming committee there. Yes.
Yeah. But it was family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For some reason they were invested in how my life had gone. Or,
yeah.
But
see, that's, this is really important, because a lot of people, we sometimes get caught up in, are we supposed to pray to the saints? Do we pray? Because, there's, you're not supposed to talk to dead people. Well, they're not dead. They're more alive now than ever. And there are people in heaven watching us and praying for us, and they're on our side, and they are our family, because we're all in the same family. We're all God's children here. And of course they're rooting for us. So here you come in, and I don't know whether or not they know yet or not whether you're going back. Maybe they just assume, oh, here comes another one, and get to watch it in front of themselves. But bottom line is, we're all connected, and there they are watching you, rooting for you. You arrive on the scene. Yay, she's here. She's made it. Yeah. So it's part of a better picture, I think, that we can kind of confuse ourselves down here on the connection between heaven and earth. So I think you did that beautifully. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's very much in the background of my mind because of what happened next, which just, I just had no expectation. I had no strong belief in Jesus Christ. He was this macabre figure on a cross to an 11-year-old child who was on the fringe of puberty, he was, to me, it was, I could barely look at that image, it just made me feel guilty. It didn't it didn't touch me spiritually, I guess.
Yeah, you're just looking at the result of an execution, what just looks like an execution to you.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't understand the significance of the crucifixion, so I didn't really believe in Jesus. I didn't pay him much mind. So when I saw this bigger light coming towards me, so everybody was in this golden light, this haze, but then this even brighter, like ball of light, like another I don't know, like a spotlight kind of thing through the light, But yeah, again, gold and the white center. And the white center suddenly began to emerge as a white-robed man, and started to walk towards me. And I could see, the black hair and just his stature, his presence. It was just beautiful. And as a child, I just thought, is that who I think it is? Those are the exact words I said to myself, is that who I think it is? Then I thought, he's really real, he's really real. And with that, he came close to me. It was like he was gliding towards me. And I just felt this warm chuckle inside of me, as if, he didn't believe that I was really real. And he found that really amusing. And, and I felt delighted to be filled with his chuckle. And then he said, "Come to me, child." And then he embraced me and he called me by a name. Now, I don't know whether he used my name. I don't know whether it's because I feel so unworthy that I don't want to think that he used my name. But I knew that the name that he called me by meant that I was his and that I belonged to him.
He does rename. I mean, Simon, you'll now be Peter. And so whatever name he gave you, maybe a higher name, maybe a more truthful name of who you are. You know what I mean?
Yes. That may be so. That makes sense, doesn't it? By him calling me that name, I knew that I was known by him and that I belonged to him, that I was part of his family. And I don't know, there were so many things in his speaking that name to me. It just meant so much. And then I felt extremely, after when that happened, and I had that feeling of being his, and I felt excruciatingly embarrassed that I hadn't believed in him. Excruciatingly.
Did he address that?
No, he didn't, because as soon as I felt the shame, I just went to his feet. And just wanted to adore him,
You mean on your knees, literally on your knees?
Literally. I just fell to his feet and, just had that feeling of, oh, you are my God, so it was just so overwhelming to have that realization of not only who he was, but who I was to him. And so I was crying and I fell to his feet, and glint of a shine, a beam of light caught my eye, and I saw that it was in the top arch of his foot. Then I realized not only that he was, that here I was at Jesus' feet and he's real, but the crucifixion was real. I just didn't expect that. You're just very much in the moment, and so everything is a revelation. Everything. It's not. There's no anticipation. Everything is brand new revelation, as though you've seen it for the first time. And so I realised, and he just then imbued. I just felt, and this is really strange because I just recently saw a film where they punctured him and there was water coming out as well as blood. And that was it. I saw myself, or I saw the blood and the water so close up that I felt like I was a part of it. And I saw his suffering close up, but he just showed me for a very, very short moment. But it was so intense that, I just said to him, does it still hurt? Because I was a child, and it was there. the little bit that he showed me was so very real. I couldn't imagine that it didn't still hurt. I couldn't imagine that it just was so disturbing. And he just said, not anymore. And he said it in such a powerful, again, it was that really powerful voice that it's like the wind or like a roar of the ocean when he said, not anymore. And then I was just taken away. I was no longer with him. I was blinded in that golden light that was coming from his foot. And I was taken away over these, again, floating up above this dusty, glary landscape that was so hot. And I was above this crowd of people. There was such a violent, hateful contrast to having been in his grace and love and glory, and then being above this mob of people who were just vying for blood. They were, and the smell, it was a really horrible smell coming from them. And just above them on this step, it was like a little ledge, but there was a wall behind her. I felt this warmth of love coming from this woman, and I was just drawn to her or put next to her, and I just took her in from head to toe. She was nothing like I expected Mary to look like, so I didn't know that it was Mary when I first saw her.
Describe her. How old was she?
Look, she looked like she was in her 60s. That's how, perhaps she wasn't, but she was so weathered. Her skin, her hands were a working woman's hands. Yeah, a woman who's worked. She didn't look like we, associate the Jewish family nowadays. She very much looked Palestinian, Middle Eastern, and her eyes, they were very brown, just this very rich brown. And
okay, but Middle Eastern in descent.
She was darker skinned, Her nose was prominent and eyes were just like almond shaped and very dark. And she had a strong nose. It was, it was quite a long nose. She was covering her mouth, so I don't know what her lips were like, but her hair was very black. It was as though they must have had hair dye in those days, black henna or something, because her hair was, a tendril of her hair fell out from her scarf. She was in brown and indigo, and a tendril of her black hair fell out of her scarf. And I didn't think it was his mother because she looked different to him. She didn't look like, we imagine.
In the moment, this was Mary. She didn't have to say it.
I know that was Mary. I didn't know when I saw her appearance, but when I felt, so I'm describing her appearance to you, but when I felt all of her emotions, I knew that it was a mother crying for her son.
Okay, this is getting more interesting because obviously we think of Mary in the blue and all that kind of. So it seems that you're being taken to the moment.
I'm not seeing the Heavenly Mother. I'm seeing her at the moment of his condemnation, of him being condemned. I didn't see that take place. I could just feel her heartbreak, her such deep sorrow, her quivering, it was so disturbing. It was really, it was heartbreaking. Just the sorrow is undescribable. And she was all alone. There were other people around her, but she was all alone. And she stood there watching her son being condemned. That's what I understood. Yeah. That's the only way I can describe it.
Is she communicating with you? I mean, you're there seeing her, but is she aware that you're there?
No. I'm just there, like, I'm not, it's just as though he's given me his consciousness to see that moment in time. And I'm just feeling all of her suffering. So when I'd asked him if it still hurts, he showed me that his mother having hurt that much still hurts. That's the understanding that he gave me. She was just scrunched up, like she was just frozen. She just couldn't believe what was happening and what she was witnessing. It was just, such acute heartbreak, I could see by her physique, I couldn't feel, I wasn't in her body, but I could feel everything coming from the crowd. I could feel everything. And because I was so close to her, I could feel everything. Her love was just overflowing. And so she was just so heartbroken. He let me see that longer than he let me see that really little snippet of his crucifixion. So, yeah.
Why do you think that is? As you look back on it now, why?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that he's, the whole thing for me was to show me empathy, to show me that, to show me how precious his mother was to him, to show how great her love was, how huge her love was, how deep her sorrow was for him, that she suffered as well.
What a lesson in empathy. What a lesson. Plus what a lesson in hate too.
The contrast, Trapper, it was just unbelievable. The contrast.
You have a very unique experience here, Pauline. Very unique. I mean, to be given of getting to know Mary and her grieving heart. Wow.
Yes. I was a child, so I think he brought me back because it was so such a difficult thing that he'd shown me. And yeah.
For you, especially at that age, it really is kind of your introduction to Mary too.
Yes. Now I knew her heart.
Her immaculate heart, as we say now. Yeah.
Yes. So that's the kind of lover he is. That's the kind of love he has. That's, when I asked him that, that's what he showed me.
He's amazing. He doesn't think like us. He just doesn't think like us.
No, exactly. And you can't, we sort of, took me a long time to get my head around the way he thinks. I got to spend a long time with him. In earth time, it was a few minutes. In heaven time, it felt like hours, felt like a few hours.
Yeah.
But so he brought me back to him and he comforted me then because I was so upset at having felt, I came back with her sorrow and he comforted me with glory. He just showed me his glory. He shone brighter than, he just shone brighter. His outpouring of love was just uplifting, so uplifting. It overtook any kind of sadness that I had. It was just, and sometimes I still experience him smiling at me. I still
describe that. I want you to describe his face, his eyes, his smile. What do you remember?
I think that I wasn't allowed to remember his eyes, but I remember when I saw his mother's eyes, and they weren't. I think his eyes were light because they weren't the same as his mother's. When I remember being surprised that his mother's eyes were brown. But he had the same sort of strong nose, very chiseled. He had this hippie look. I know it sounds silly, but he did. He sort of looked just this casual perfection that was just, he's very handsome. Of course, he had a beard. I do remember his lips because every time he smiled, I just felt elated to have made him smile, and the delight that shines through he just delights in in you. You know, he just delighted in me.
I wish when we prayed, I wish we felt everything you just said.
Yeah.
Because that's the reality. That's the reality as we pray. That's the reality. He's right there, loving us, smiling, empathy, everything that we're going through. I wish we felt it.
Yeah.
I mean, even now when you pray, can you get back to that? I mean, you've experienced it, but can you feel that?
Occasionally, yes.
Yeah, nice.
Yes. So then after comforting me and just, he told me then, you know, it was he let me know it was his honor to die for the world. And by this, I've saved the whole world. And I was like, the whole world? Yes, the whole world. And I sort of said, the whole world? Really? Yes, really. You know, and now understanding that, I guess it depends on whether we want to accept that or not.
Yeah.
That's what it all depends on.
Yeah.
Yeah, accept his love, accept that we're his beloved, because the story goes on. Again, he showed me how beloved we are. He then took me to a rock. He said, come, my child. And he sat me down on a rock and my legs dangled over this rock, and below us there was a nebula. And it was just, he said to me, this, you know, this is creation sort of thing. And by that, him showing me that, it was so beautiful. The colours were like the aurora borealis. And by him showing me that, I understood, okay, he's above the universe. You know, he reigns over creation. And then he said, look here, my child. And he put his right hand, just swept it in front of me. And his hand was much bigger now than it was. And in the trace of his hand, this book appeared, and it was tilted towards us as though it was on a bookstand. But behind it, it was just the stars. And there was on the first page, there was some writing, but I can't remember exactly what it said. So I proceeded to get a life review. Now, of course, I'd never heard of a near-death experience. I'd never heard of life reviews. I was just a child. And so I was watching and became again involved in this story of this beautiful young couple that was so beautiful. And they were loving on this beautiful baby and just the love that emanated from them. And he just took me through, and just every aspect of love in this family's life I saw. And they were so beautiful and so perfect. I thought I was watching a Hollywood production. Everyone was so opalescent and glowing with love. And because everyone was so beautiful, I didn't recognize that it was my life review or my life story until this incident occurred with a friend, and we were arguing. She was a little bit older than me, and I overreacted to something she said, and I said something really hurtful to her about her mother, who's just passed away last week, actually. No thought behind my words, and but I felt her pain now. So I realised then, oh, wow, this is my life story that he's showing me here. And I felt embarrassed because suddenly there was a break in all of this love, and it was by my action. I turned around to him and I said, but, she hurt me and, but. And he just smiled at me. He didn't have anything to say. He didn't condemn me, but I felt upset that I had messed up the story.
Yeah. Did you get a sense that he was waiting for you to come to your own realization? Like you said, he didn't fight back at you. He just smiled at you, like waiting for you to get it.
Yeah. He was waiting for me to get it. And I didn't get it. When I knew he was waiting for me to get it, I said, but tell me what this life is about, because I don't get it.
At 11, you asked him that? At 11? That's pretty good.
Well, I've just seen my whole life. I've seen just the most beautiful aspects of a life that I thought was really hard and, not that loving. I thought it was really harsh. And he just shown me how he's been seeing my life. He just showed me everyone in my life, how they look through his eyes. I just realized, and I said, I don't know what this life is about. Please tell me, because I don't get it. I just don't get it. And he just said simply, it's about love. Life is about love. And I said, but you don't get it. No one lives like that. I can't live like that if everyone else doesn't live like that. And he just laughed when I said, you don't get it. He laughed.
Hey, Jesus, you don't get it. I love it. I like you as an 11-year-old. I like you as an 11. I think that's pretty good. That's great.
You still are yourself. You still are very much yourself. Yeah. I mean, you're freer, but you are very much yourself. I'm not going to argue here. And then I sort of got it that he wanted me to go back.
Go back? Pauline doesn't want to go back.
Please don't make me go back.
And I say, please come back next week, part 2. Yeah, we got to take a break here. There's still a lot more to go in Pauline's story. There's actually more to her life review I want to get to. And then there's this really hard landing as Pauline goes back into her body.
I know who I am. I'm the person who was just with Jesus, but I don't know my parents. I don't know my sister or my brother. I don't know anybody.
And later, when Pauline was 33, Jesus dropped by.
I just felt this presence behind me, and I thought, somebody's come into my house. I just froze,
Next week on the podcast, Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. A couple of other things here because, man, there was just so much here. The Mary thing, this woman who was about 48, and Pauline said she looked like she was in her 60s. Yeah, 2,000 years ago, a 48-year-old woman probably looked like she was in her 60s. But black, still had the dark hair, though, still had the hair. Again, Jesus introducing Pauline to Mary, not only to himself, but to Mary. These are pretty new figures for this 11-year-old girl, Pauline. And Pauline, I don't think it's an accident or a coincidence. The part of the crucifixion that Jesus showed you, the piercing of the heart, the water and the blood together. Because that immediately takes us to Luke 2, the presentation. Joseph and Mary taking Jesus to the temple. And Simeon says to Mary, the sword will pierce your soul as well. You're going to suffer too, Mary. And we heard that suffering. We felt that suffering today. And we weren't even to the crucifixion yet. This suffering was going to be going on for a while. And staying with this water and blood, Pauline, the temple in Jerusalem, at Passover, they would sacrifice over 200,000 lambs, over 200,000 for Passover dinner, right? That's a lot of blood. That's a lot of pouring of blood out over the altar. They had a drainage system. And they'd wash the blood down the drain. So the water and the blood came out of the side of the temple and then drained down into the stream, and it was carried away. And here's Jesus out of the side of the temple of Jesus Christ. The water and the blood, you said you felt like you were part of it. That's actually a great sign for you because as St. Paul says, we are baptized into the death of Christ. What does that mean? When we're baptized, that's the water, we are baptized into Christ's death, the water and the blood together. We die too at baptism. Our old self is dead. We're now new beings, clean, and followers of Christ. And then the early church fathers also saw something in that water and blood coming out of the side of Jesus. They saw the new Adam. The original Adam, what came out of his side? His bride, Eve. And what came out of Christ's side? His bride, the church, in the two sacraments represented there, the baptism, the water, and the Eucharist, the blood. So there's all kinds of things going on. And just one more item about baptism, and this has to do with the baptism of Jesus in the Jordan. How is it I didn't learn this part until yesterday? How do I not know this? This is one of those moments where I go, how do I not know this? How do I not know that? Okay, Jesus, baptized in the Jordan. Question, do you know what is unique about that spot where Jesus was baptized? On the whole planet, think about the whole planet Earth. What is special, if you will, about that particular spot on the planet where Jesus was baptized? Do you know? If you please make sure your answer is in the form of a question. Do you know that it's the lowest point on Earth? What? It is the elevation is almost 1,300 feet below sea level. This is where it's about to go into the Dead Sea, where nothing lives. Almost 1,300 feet below sea level. It is the lowest point you can stand on this earth. Jesus, who entered this world at the lowest point, his crib being a feeder for animals in a stable, picks the lowest point on this earth to be baptized, who was executed in the lowest way possible, the most embarrassing way possible. On a cross was humiliation. On a cross for all to see. That Jesus. Jesus, who ultimately ascended to the highest place in heaven, sitting at the right hand of his Father. That Jesus who loves us so much that millions of people have had experiences similar to Pauline's and all these other touched by heaven moments, because he loves us so much, he just keeps shooting off the flare gun from heaven, saying, I'm right here, and I adore you, I love you. He loves us so much that there aren't words. There just are no words. Jesus, he doesn't think like us. He just doesn't. More about this great story next week with Pauline, okay? I do need your story. Get a hold of me at touchedbyheaven.net. Oh, and I should mention also, since we were talking about Mary, you got to know Mary a little bit better today, and I know you're going to get to know her even better with some wonderful stories called Mary, His Messenger, because Jesus keeps sending Mom. He keeps sending his mom, whom he loves so much. Get to know Mary through Mary, His Messenger. You'll find it here at touchedbyheaven.net, episode 111. Or also you can go to trapperjackspeaks.com and find it there as well for download, or we'll ship it to you as a CD, however you want it, okay? Patreon shout-out goes to Catherine Wetland. Thank you so much, Catherine, for helping us out at patreon.com. Just search for Trapper Jack. Thanks for your monthly support as well. And I have to thank one more person. Karina, thank you again. Karina Machado, she does Spirit Sisters podcast out of Australia, and she hooked me up with Pauline for this episode, and we appreciate that very much. See you next week, right here on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.